Hello and welcome to my quite in-depth guide on eating and drinking in the DayZ Standalone. My name is Marino, and I'm primarily occupied with keeping others and, of course, myself alive by playing as a medic. I think playing as a medic in DayZ isn't only about repairing damage that is already done, but also about preventing damage in the first place. So when it comes to survival, a healthy meal is no less important than bandages and blood bags, really. The eating and drinking system has more to it than one might expect at first glance, and the minimalistic feedback in the game doesn't really help all that much with understanding what is going on. But rather than me telling you what to do and what not to do, I'd like you to understand why something is right to do and why something is, well, at least not very helpful. So I decided to take a visual approach to explaining what's happening behind the curtain when you eat and drink, and what happens when you don't eat and drink, what effects your metabolism has on your whole well-being, and what you can do to increase your chances of survival in general. Now, what may surprise you at first is that you don't only have a kind of hunger meter that fills up when you eat and a thirst meter that fills up when you drink. It's a bit more complex than that. You actually also have a virtual stomach. I'm going to explain how those three, well, storages work and how they interact when you eat or drink something. I'm also going to talk about characteristics of different food items and how blood and health regeneration work, because those are really closely connected to eating and drinking. Lastly, I'm going to bring up several common misconceptions and frequently asked questions related to those topics that keep coming up in the forums and answer them by applying what we will have learned until then. A large portion of the information provided in this video comes from my own observations and experiences. I'm always curious how things work and do quite a lot of research in various forums and wikis. But what was most helpful were two links posted in the DayZ forums recently. One is to an article on DayZDB and one is to raw data posted on Pastebin. Those contain numbers taken directly from the game files that really allow for putting everything we see and don't see in the game into context and understanding why things happen when they happen. Those numbers do conflict slightly, but I will point out those differences. One short disclaimer before we can talk about the interesting stuff. This video is based on the DayZ Standalone version 0.30.113860. Since DayZ is currently in pre-alpha, a lot of changes are going to happen down the road as development continues. Everything is subject to change. Also, due to the rather small amount of feedback in the game, some things are pretty difficult to verify. However, everything I say is of course to the best of my knowledge. When I'm not sure about something, I'll highlight that in blue and mention it explicitly. If you want to know what's going on in the game when it comes to hunger and thirst, and also your blood level, you need to be aware of 5 what I call bodily storages. Your stomach, water and energy, and also blood and health. I'll go through all of these and tell you how they work. Let's start with the stomach, where you put the good stuff in. Your stomach works like a container with a certain maximum capacity. Now, the two sources that include numbers differ when it comes to the maximum capacity. One says it's 3000, the other doesn't mention a maximum capacity at all, but implies that it is above 3000. All things considered, it doesn't really matter how high it really is, because you will have begun vomiting before you reach it, so yeah. Might be 4000, might be 5000. It's not really relevant when it comes to understanding the concept, so let's stick to 4000 for now. As for the unit, I like to think of milliliters as an appropriate unit of volume. 4000 milliliters is actually quite close to reality. An actual stomach can reach a volume of about 4000 milliliters or 4 liters, according to Wikipedia. The following numbers differ between these sources as well, but my observations suggest that those numbers are more likely to be valid for the current version of the game. Now, depending on how filled your stomach is, you will get different text messages in the lower left corner, or no messages at all. Those will start appearing once you get above a stomach content of 2,500 units, letting you know that you feel well stuffed or really full. Nothing bad happens at this stage yet, so if you keep eating and reach 3,500 units, you'll see some more severe messages that tell you that you feel overfed and are close to vomiting. While those messages are still in white, nothing bad is going to happen. But if you keep eating and or drinking and get above 3,900, the messages turn red and you'll see your character bend over and vomit. You will lose a bit of your stomach's content and also lose energy and water in the process. I'll talk about energy and water in a bit, but for now just be aware that this isn't a good thing and should be avoided. Unless, and this is unconfirmed, you have ingested something poisonous. Somebody in the forum suggested that vomiting cleared up his sickness after he was force-fed rotten fruit. I have not tested this myself, but if you happen to be in the same situation and you don't have charcoal tablets available, you may as well try this out. And of course, tell me what you found out for science. If you want to force yourself to vomit, all you have to do is to fill up your stomach. The easiest way to do this would be finding a water pump and just drinking until you start to vomit. Intentional or not, when you vomit, you will get a sick status in your inventory screen in a greenish-yellowish color that will fade if you stop eating for a while and let your stomach rest. Maybe there's also an additional ongoing effect that continues to drain your energy or water in the meantime, tied to the sick status, but I'm not aware of that, and it's difficult to find out. When you spawn at the coast, your stomach isn't empty. New characters begin with 1000 units in it, and that means you would have to eat or drink quite a bit before the first messages related to your stomach would appear. So what do you need to take away from this? You should think of your stomach as a limiter to how much you can take in a given period of time. You generally want to avoid vomiting, but in the other extreme, an empty stomach is no problem whatsoever. Oddly enough, the message "my stomach is growling" is not directly related to your stomach at all, but more on that in a bit. The second storage is the water that you have in your body that it needs to function, to dilute your blood, keeping your brain working, your muscles, your joints, pretty much everything. It has a maximum capacity of 4000 units, and again, I like to think of milliliters here. Just makes sense when talking about water. When it comes to water, you should aim to keep your storage well filled so you won't run into problems. Realizing you don't have any fluids on you when thirst kicks in and you're in the middle of a battle and can't get away, or far away from any water supplies, is not desirable. When your water level drops, the first stage at which you will get a notification is at 2000, or half your maximum capacity. At this level, you're considered to be lightly dehydrated, and you will get a green thirsty status in your inventory screen at some point. The game tells you that you feel like having a drink, but if you don't and keep dropping lower, you will eventually reach a water level of 1000, or medium dehydration, with a yellow status effect. You will be warned that your head begins to hurt and that you should really find something to drink soon. This is sound advice, because if you still drop lower, you will start suffering from high dehydration with a red status effect and red text saying that you are now officially dying of dehydration. This isn't an empty warning. At this stage, you begin losing health and blood, and you will die eventually. Needless to say that you don't want this to happen, so drink frequently. What's also interesting to know is that you spawn in the game with a water level of 1800, so you actually start being lightly dehydrated. This is the reason why you get these thirsty messages so soon, which annoys quite a lot of people. The easiest way to remedy this is finding a water pump ASAP after spawning. To sum things up, you want to keep the level of your water storage as high as possible to be prepared to not being able to drink for a while. You cannot store a lot of water in your body, so you need to carry plenty of fluids in your inventory. You also don't have a very large buffer between maximum capacity and when thirst sets in at half your maximum capacity. Especially when you're physically active and your water depletes at an increased rate, you need to drink frequently. The third storage is your energy. Energy works similar to water in many ways, but if you compare the maximum capacity, you'll realize quickly that you can store an enormous amount of energy, 20,000 units. In this case, I like to think of those units as being calories. 20,000 calories that you can store in your muscles and, well, pretty much your fatty tissue for later, like evolution intended. What's even more striking is the fact that you're only considered to be hungry at an energy or calorie level of 600. That's only 3% of your maximum capacity compared to the 50% of your maximum capacity at which you're considered to be lightly dehydrated when you're looking at water. Dropping below 600 energy results in general messages that tell you that you're feeling hungry, and you get a green hungry status effect in your inventory. If you continue to not taking in any energy or calories for a while, you may drop to 300 energy or very hungry status. The status effect in your inventory becomes yellow, and the messages tell you that you're starving or that your stomach is growling. Stomach is growling? Right. This message is related to your energy level, not your stomach level, which may easily lead to some confusion. When bad comes to worse and you drop even lower than that, at 100 energy and below, you will be dying of starvation. The status effect turns red, says starving instead of just hungry, and you will get red warning messages. Like for high dehydration, you start losing blood and health, which will eventually kill you. But the effect isn't as intense as for water. Here you can see again that water is actually more critical for your body than food and has to be more closely considered. When you spawn, you do so at an energy level of 1000, which is well above the hungry status. This means you won't have to worry about food for quite a while. Finding water is much more important than food at first. Summing things up again, energy is another storage that you want to keep as full as possible. You can store an enormous amount of energy in your body as, well, let's face it, fat. That's its main purpose, keeping the organism alive during periods of short food supplies. However, hunger only kicks in at comparatively low levels, around which I think many people tend to stay forever. Only eating a bit when you feel hungry and waiting for the message to appear again is nonsense. You would not be using a huge energy storage, constantly staying between maybe 500 and 1000 energy, when you could really store another 19,000 energy. Therefore, my advice is as follows: eat everything you can find, apart from rotten fruit, of course. This brings us nicely to food and drinks. Food and drinks have 5 attributes: a total volume, an energy content, a water content, a nutritional index, and a used quantity. The volume is the space it takes up in your stomach. Again, I like to think of milliliters here. The energy content is just that. How much does consuming the item fill up your energy storage? In calories to me. Water content is the same for water in milliliters. Now, the nutritional index is a bit tricky. It's not immediately apparent what this might do, but I have the theory that this is the amount of time it takes for the food or drink to be absorbed by the body. More on that in a bit. And finally, the used quantity, which isn't terribly relevant for now. This is just the portion of the item that's used up every time you eat or drink it in the game. I also picked 2 foods and 2 drinks and put their numbers here, but ignore those for now. We'll take a closer look at those later. Let's first take a look at food conversion. Let's take our freshly spawned player with the default stomach, water, and energy levels. Let's then assume that said player somehow found a can of beans and managed to open it cleanly. The player then consumes the entire contents of the can, which has a total volume of 440 milliliters. This volume now enters the stomach and is added to the stomach level. The water and nutrients from the beans are absorbed by the body and added to the respective storages. 330 water and 462 energy. This process may happen instantaneously, but maybe it's the nutritional index that's responsible for the speed of this process. Not terribly important from a gameplay point of view, just throwing this in for the sake of completeness. So as you can see, the hunger and thirst levels that the game reminds you about being low aren't directly filled by the food you consume. It actually takes a proper detour through your stomach. With that in mind, we can now take another look at some of the food's attributes. We can see that baked beans really are an all-around good kind of food. They're decently average in every respect, not taking up too much volume in your stomach while providing both energy and quite a bit of water. Assuming that the nutritional index does what I think it does, the energy and water arrive in their respective storages over a period of 5 minutes. Rice, on the other hand, is a pretty extreme case. An entire pack of rice does, of course, take up a higher volume than the rather small can of beans, but take a look at this energy count. Rice is extremely rich and dense energy that can keep you going for a long time. It also only takes up twice the inventory slots of a can of beans, while providing 4 times the energy per inventory slot. However, this comes at a price. Rice currently cannot be prepared, and we only have the option to eat it raw. Raw is highly exorbitant, and this shows. Eating a pack of rice drains 1 liter of your water storage. That's a quarter of its maximum. Be careful when you're already low on water. Eating rice may not be the best choice. Also, the nutritional index is pretty high, which matches reality, rice being rich in carbohydrates that are slowly broken down, a slowly long-term stream of energy. Soda is one of the 2 drinks currently available in the game, next to water. It has a pretty small volume, and the fact that it does provide calories tells us that this isn't some diet soda, it's the real sugary deal. This energy is also quickly made available, 36 seconds as the sugar enters the bloodstreams for a quick jolt of energy. Water, on the other hand, does not provide any energy whatsoever. Water doesn't have calories after all. It is, however, more efficient than soda when it comes to hydration per inventory slot. That, and the fact that canteens and bottles can be refilled, mean that those belong in every survivor's backpack. If you're interested in the attributes of the other food and drink items in the game, you can find a link to one of my sources that lists them in the description of this video. Everything that enters the body has to leave it in one way or the other. Only part of the digestion process is modeled, but of course your storages do deplete somehow. For your stomach, it's digestion at a steady rate of 1 per second. This means that it would take more than an hour to digest the contents of an entirely full stomach, which won't happen because you would vomit before you were to reach that level, of course. It would take about 58 minutes when you're fully stuffed and about 42 minutes to go from the first stuffed messages back to completely empty. Your water and energy storages deplete based on your activity. The more active you are, the faster they deplete. Unfortunately, I cannot give you the exact numbers, but I think it's fairly safe to assume that while staying still, walking or jogging are probably quite efficient, running and especially sprinting aren't very efficient, distance traveled versus water and energy consumption wise, and should not be the main travel modes when your water or energy levels are already dangerously low. I also think that regenerating blood and health deplete your storages at an increased rate. I could not find numbers confirming this, but since those are closely tied together and with how realistic everything else is modeled, I think this is reasonable to assume. And again, a word of advice. Your water storage is much smaller than your energy storage, and you can enter risky levels much easier. So be sure to have a steady water supply when exerting yourself. I just mentioned blood and health regeneration, so let's take a look at those next. When you start out, both your blood and health levels are at their maximum of 5,000 each. Some DayZ mob players might now ask, I'm familiar with blood, but what's health? That's quite difficult to answer. Information about health is scarce, but it seems to me that while blood functions as an all-round health bar, it's now rather one component in your well-being as a whole, represented by health. I like to think of it as a kind of pain tolerance, your organ function, the nervous system, the organism as a whole. When those are overloaded, for example, the pain becomes too much to bear, your organs fail, neural circuits are impaired, the system just shuts down. This is another layer to represent health as a whole, beyond just blood. Gameplay-wise, it means especially that a nearly dead person that has been shot multiple times, is barely bandaged up, has multiple bone fractures treated with morphine, and has just been jump-started back from cardiac arrest, can't just be given a blood transfusion and jump around like a freshly hatched spring chicken. You need time and proper circumstances to recover health, no matter what. However, since this guide is primarily about eating and drinking and what effect those have on your regeneration, I won't get into more medical details here. Let's instead lose some blood and health, so we have something we need to regenerate. Ouch. While we know what it takes to recover health, it's not that easy to tell how you lose health and how much you lose. I'm therefore making a few educated guesses. Most, if not all, effects that cause you to lose blood probably also have an effect on your health. Furthermore, I think it's likely that dropping too low on either blood or health will probably kill you. Of course, you will see various other effects before that happens, blurry vision or unconsciousness. You'll want to make sure your blood and health don't dip too low, so restoring them is really important. When it comes to regeneration, be aware that you have to regenerate your blood before health may even start to recover. There are two ways to increase your blood level. Through natural regeneration, which we are going to talk about, or supplied externally with a blood bag or a saline IV, administered by another person. This belongs in the medical field though, so we'll stick to natural regeneration. There are two regeneration speeds. The first is slow regeneration, a rate of 1 blood per second. To enable this regeneration, you need to be hydrated and well fed. Really well fed, actually. Your energy level has to be and stay above 3,500, and your water level has to stay at 3,000 and above at the same time. When those criteria are met, you will begin regenerating slowly, and color will return to your vision. At this rate, recovering 1,000 units of lost blood takes a little more than 15 minutes, so in most cases you should be fully recovered within quite a bit less than an hour in most circumstances. If your blood level were even lower, well, you probably would have respawned by now. You can also speed things up quite a bit by eating enough to enter full regeneration. If your energy level is above 5,000 and your water level above 3,500, you will recover 3 blood per second. Remember that your maximum water capacity is 4,000, so to stay above 3,500, you should drink even more frequently than usual, and give your body some rest. Regaining blood at this rate is really fast, and you can literally watch the colors return. I tested this myself after donating 2,000 blood, and the effect was quite remarkable. When your blood is back to its maximum capacity, your body may begin restoring its health in the background. You need to maintain the criteria for full regeneration, 3,500 water and 5,000 energy, to begin your recovery at a rate of 3 health per second. You probably won't notice this happening because, as far as I know, there are no noticeable effects tied to health yet, aside from dying when it's too low. This may change in the future though, so better be aware of the existence of a health bar underneath your blood bar. I'd like to end this guide by addressing some of the most common questions about eating, drinking, and regeneration that I keep reading in the forums by applying what we've learned so far. First of all, I have to drink every 5 seconds. What the F is going on? So let's recap. We know that you spawn with a water level of 1800 out of 4000, which is slightly dehydrated. Therefore, thirst messages will appear very soon. We also know that a can of soda restores 330 water. Putting this knowledge together, we can conclude that drinking a can of soda when the thirst message first appears, which isn't even at precisely 2000 water but may as well happen a few minutes later when you're really already lower than that, well, drinking the can of soda now will just barely take you out of the light dehydration range. And yes, you will keep getting those messages in very short intervals if you keep doing that, especially when you're active at the same time. This also means that you're leaving the remaining 2000 units of water capacity empty. This is the equivalent of 6 cans of soda or 2 full canteens that won't go to waste when you drink them. Quite the opposite. You buy yourself a long period of time in which you don't have to think about being thirsty just by doing that. Therefore, my recommendation is to make finding a water pump a top priority after spawning. Find one and drink until you're told that your stomach is full. This is easily enough water to fill your water storage, and you can then set out traveling inland and looking for food there. Next issue. There is so much stuff that I want to keep and so little inventory space. I don't have all the room for the food and drinks, and I don't want to leave them behind. So let's recap again. A can of beans takes up 1 inventory slot and contains, well, if opened properly, 462 energy. Your hungry status begins at 600 energy stored, and chances are you currently are somewhere around that value. We also know that you can actually store 20,000 units of energy in your body by now. Since your internal energy storage is that big, you can store the calorie equivalent of more than 43 cans of beans in your body. Gaining a few pounds in the apocalypse is really a good idea. Chances that you have a job interview for Abercrombie & Fitch coming up are pretty low after all, so being a virtual glutton is perfectly fine. This does of course also mean that you don't really need to carry all the food items in your inventory. There's one exception to that rule though. I personally do carry several of them, mostly rice and canteens, to give them to my patients if they are malnourished. But unless you want to give the food to somebody else, just eat everything you find right away. There's really no point in being almost hungry all the time and having food clogging up your inventory. Another really common question is this. I lost blood and I want to regenerate. I know that I can't be hungry for that and I'm not, but my vision is still gray and blurry. I think natural regeneration doesn't work at all in this build. So let's recap once more. Hungry messages first appear at, 600 energy, so you're probably usually around this value. Now you decide to eat something extra to get into the regeneration range, but, well, nothing happens. Be aware that even slow regeneration requires quite a bit more than an extra can of tuna or 2 apples and a banana. It's more likely that your 2900 energy, or even more than that, short of scratching the slow regeneration region. That's the equivalent of more than 6 cans of beans, plus what you use up while searching for the food, plus the extra energy that you need while actually regenerating. For full regeneration, it's even more than that. Chances are you're more than 4400 energy short of reaching full regeneration. You could eat a whole pack of rice and wouldn't be there yet. And talking about rice, remember that you also need to get and keep your water levels really high for regeneration to work. This supports my main advice. Become a glutton. Don't save food for later and don't leave new food because you don't have the inventory space. If you keep yourself constantly in high energy ranges and drink until you're stuffed whenever you get to a water pump, you will probably always be in the high regeneration range without any extra effort. And lastly, I'd like to get back to a pretty special case. How the bleep can I be both well fed and have a growling stomach at the same time? And yet another quick recap. Feeling well fed is related to your stomach. The growling stomach, on the other hand, hints at a lack of energy. So chances are you try to overcome your hunger by filling your stomach with water. And that won't work, of course, because water contains no calories. Wait for your stomach to digest the water and find something proper to eat. And eat a lot of it. That's all from me for now. This has gotten quite a bit longer than I expected it to, but I hope you enjoyed finding out why things happen the way they do happen, rather than just being told to do something without getting an explanation for it. If you know what it takes to maintain your health, the apocalypse doesn't seem quite as bad anymore, don't you think?